Pausing. You've definitely done this hundreds of times in your playthrough of Ocarina of Time, or any Zelda game really. Pressing the start button brings up the pause menu, which allows you to equip items to the C buttons, swap pieces of equipment, and manually save your progress. With the various items you collect and swap out, pausing is absolutely required to beat Ocarina of Time. Or is it? Ocarina of Time is a pretty broken game after all, so I wanted to try to beat Ocarina of Time without pressing that pesky start button, no bringing up the pause screen, playing it on an actual Nintendo 64 with the original controller and an original 1.0 cartridge of the game. This one's Japanese, although you can do this on a 1.0 North American copy as well. As soon as you boot up the game, we are greeted by our first obstacle, the title screen. It says, press start. But this is a non-issue, since you could just press A to start the game instead. I started a fresh file and named Link Zero Pause, watched the opening cutscene, and exited Link's house in Kokiri Forest, where I faced the first true obstacle, escaping. Normally, in order to progress, we need to equip a sword and shield in order to enter the Deku Tree, the game's first dungeon. We can easily obtain the Kokiri sword from the nearby maze and buy the Deku shield for 40 rupees at the shop, but oh no! We need to pause the game to manually equip the sword and shield to bypass Mido. Dang, I guess you can't get anywhere in this game without pausing, is what I would say if we couldn't just escape the forest and skip the Deku Tree. That's right, we're gonna leave Kokiri Forest without beating the Deku Tree. Over the past 16 years, there have been many methods found to leave the forest early, and out of all of them, there is only one way to escape without pausing to equip an item, and it's thanks to this rock. On February 17th, 2019, Glitch Hunter Jolin proved that it was possible to escape the forest itemless without cheats, using a rock to clip past the guard blocking the exit, no pausing required. However, it is very precise, down to 1,000th of a unit for Link's position, and a specific facing angle as well. From this very specific position and angle, you need to throw the rock, hold down on the analog stick mid-throw, press Z on the correct frame to initiate a backwalk, and right when the rock falls right on Link's coordinates, you press A to talk to the guard. If done correctly, Link's displacement from the falling rock pushing him, combined with a few more units of displacement in the opposite direction when talking to the guard, is enough to clip past him. From there, you can roll under the guard and be on your merry way. This trick is nothing short of a miracle, and was made possible thanks to the efforts of OOT community members such as Blinny, Rosewater, Danny B, and Natalia Has Died. Many of them have computer science and programming backgrounds, which are useful skills to have when glitch hunting, and to gain a deeper understanding of a game's mechanics. If these are skills that interest you, check out boot.dev, the sponsor of today's video. Boot.dev is a programming bootcamp that combines education along with the engaging elements of an RPG. As someone that was in college during lockdown in 2020, I found myself really bored and inattentive as my classes switched to an online format. Boot.dev, on the other hand, sets out to tackle this problem. As you learned back-end development in the Python and Go languages, you'll earn XP, level up, and you can even accept quests to complete on a global leaderboard. After all, the smartest way to learn how to code is to make it not boring, but to make the boot.dev online course a self-paced experience that feels like a captivating RPG game. The platform is designed to get you writing a ton of code, because getting your hands on the keyboard and shipping products is really the only way to learn. To get started, simply click the link in the description below and use my code LunaticJ to get 25% off of your first payment, whether that be the first month or the first year. Thanks again for boot.dev for sponsoring today's video. Now, the discovery of itemless escape was great and all, but how can you expect a human to pull this off? It's one thing to have a couple double frame perfect inputs with the rock throw itself, but getting into position is a whole other problem. Again, for this itemless escape to work, you need to be in the correct position down to 1,000th of a unit, along with the correct facing angle. For years, there was no semi-consistent method to get in a position for the rock throw, until November 2nd, 2023, when Cadmic found a consistent setup that, while still difficult, was quick and much more realistic for a human to pull off. The setup to pick up the rock in the correct position was easy, but it gets tricky from here. After picking up the rock, I held Z and flicked the stick down so Link moves slightly back for a couple frames. I then fully turned left. Now, it is time for the small ESS turns, where I briefly tap the stick in ESS position, the smallest range outside of the analog stick's dead zone, to rotate Link ever so slightly. One ESS to the right, then two ESS up, which is so subtle you wouldn't notice unless you had a memory viewer for the facing angle visible. Finally, one ESS left, and then it's time to hold up, walking forward at full speed until I need to let go of the stick completely on the correct frame to get into the exact position for the rock throw. Needless to say, this took a lot of practice to get down. I initially started learning this a couple months ago in the practice room at AGDQ 2024, playing on GZ, the practice ROM developed by Glenk. GZ has features such as save states and memory watches that allowed for more efficient practice, and for me to view my position and facing angle values as I was learning the trick. Once I was comfortable enough, I took off the training wheels, now using the texture details near Link's feet to tell if I was in the correct position. I moved from practicing the different segments of the trick in isolation to chaining everything together. Some days, it would take me a while to nail itemless escape during attempts, but with enough practice, it eventually paid off. I think I'll be much more organized when I script this out, because this will be a post-commentated video. Getting here is the easy part, upcoming is the hard part of the trick. Flick back for a couple frames, ESS left to turn perfectly 90 degrees or so, one ESS turn to the right, two up that are very subtle, you can't even see. Then we have to hold up and let go on the correct frame so we land on just the right unit. Okay, this looks good. This looks good. No way! Holy
deterrence. Devouring flame.
Oh my god!
Deterrence down. Shadow flame.
The practice paid off! Let's go! We're only 3 minutes in and we got out. We're already out of the forest. Mind you, this is only the first trick of the Zero Pause challenge, and I personally find it only the third hardest one I had to do. Also, if you end up enjoying watching this challenge to the very end, don't forget to subscribe, because we're just getting started. Upon exiting Kokiri Forest to Hyrule Field, Saria gives us the Fairy Ocarina, which will become very important later on. But for now, we have a new objective: head to Hyrule Castle Town. To ensure we make it to the drawbridge before sundown, we will backwalk, which is faster than walking forward and rolling. By climbing the drawbridge chains and hopping off, we can begin grinding rupees, as we'll need at least 95. Once I got 95 rupees, I headed for the shop and oh no! It's nighttime and the shop is closed! At least, that's what it looks like. The door may be locked, but by doing a little tricky jump off of this nearby crate, we can clip past the door and enter. Here, we use the 95 rupees to buy a Hylian shield and Deku nuts. Both of these will be very important, as you'll soon see. After leaving the shop, there's nothing really left to do as Child Link, as we can't pause to equip any items. So I headed to the Temple of Time to perform Door of Time Skip. You're probably familiar with this trick if you've watched a speedrun, but you might have seen people do it with a sword. It's also possible to skip the Door of Time without a sword, found by Mr. Grunz in October 2011, but it is much harder. First, you do a quick setup for the angle in the left corner. Then, you input a side roll by holding the analog stick partially down while holding Z and pressing A. Then, at the correct time, you hold back all the way and press A to input a backward side hop, and then let go of everything. Once Link clips through, you have to repress Z to target the side of the Door of Time on the correct frame, which will transfer your side hop momentum into that wall, allowing you to shimmy around the Door of Time and reach the Master Sword early. After pulling the Master Sword, Link will become an adult, now that 7 years have passed. One of the first things you'll notice once you regain control of Link is that there are a few items automatically equipped. The Master Sword is on the B button, and since I bought the Hylian shield, that is also equipped. Deku Nuts are on C left since I bought them as young Link. If I didn't buy them, C left would be blank. C down has the bomb icon with 0 bombs, as the game expected me to have grabbed the bomb bag as a child, even though I completely skipped it, and the Ocarina is on C right. This is why I grabbed the Ocarina, as well as bought the Hylian Shield and Nuts as child. These items are automatically equipped when you become Adult Link for the first time, if you have them. This is the case for every casual playthrough of Vanilla Ocarina of Time, and next time you play through the game and reach this part, keep an eye out for that. Details aside, these are the only items we'll have equipped for the rest of the challenge, and with the exception of bombs, they are all important for beating the game without the pause screen. So, let's make our way out of the Temple of Time and, uh-oh, the door of time was never opened. I'm trapped. The easiest way out is to save the game and reload your save file, as saving outside of a dungeon as an adult will spawn Link at the entrance of the Temple of Time. But hold it! We can't pause the game to save the game. That's against the rules. However, there is still a way to save the game without pausing. Death. By performing a very easy out-of-bounds clip by jump-slashing at this acute angled corner, I can void out, losing 1 heart each time until Link dies. Here, the game will display 2 prompts. Do you want to save? To which I answer yes. And do you want to continue playing? To which I answer no. This puts me back at the title screen, where I can select my save file and exit the Temple of Time. At this point, you may be wondering how I'm going to reach the end of the game and defeat Ganon, especially since I can't equip new items to clear many dungeons, nor would I be able to equip light arrows to stun Ganondorf. The answer is actually the wrong warp from Gohma's boss room in the Deku Tree to the Ganon's tower collapse sequence at the end of the game. On paper, it's an obvious solution if you're lightly familiar with OOT speedrunning, since you'd only need to beat the Deku Tree, which doesn't require many items, and it bypasses needing the light arrows for Ganondorf, as the tower collapse takes place after the Ganondorf fight. This wrong warp is known as Ganondor, and was the big speedrun strat in any percent for several years. However, in that context, the trick was performed as Child Link using a bottle with bugs to activate a glitch known as Ocarina items, which allows you to play a fake Ocarina on the edge of a blue warp that normally teleports you out of the dungeon. This activates the blue warp, but allows you to still control Link, and if you exit the door from the Gohma boss room back to the Deku Tree basement, on the same frame as the game is supposed to take you away, Link spawns in the Ganon's Tower Collapse interior. With the real Ocarina equipped to C right, this eliminates the need to get a bottle and perform Ocarina items. Except that normally, the Ocarina cannot be used in boss rooms. This definitely complicates things, but there is a solution to all of this. But for now, let's get back to where I was. I exited the Temple of Time and made a quick stop to Kakariko Village, where I talked to the Cucko lady where she gave me the pocket egg, which kicks off the Big Goron Sword trade quest. This seems odd since I won't be able to equip it, but it'll be important later. Just trust the process. After getting the egg, I made my way back to Kokiri Forest, but waited until nighttime. This is because I was headed for the Deku Tree, which is normally inaccessible as an adult. But since this is Ocarina of Time, there is a way. Pauseless at that. On the way, I slayed the giant Deku Baba near the forest entrance to max out my Deku Nuts, got rid of an annoying Octorok, and then got ISG, the Infinite Sword Glitch. When reading a sign mid-crouch stab, the sword will begin to have a white glow, swinging infinitely. This prevents Link from walking off ledges, which allows Link to hover in the air when shielding damage. Hovering is normally done using explosives as a damage source, but since I had none, I used the gold Skulltula on the roof of the twins' house instead. I used a setup from Kairu, where I did 2 quick hovers off of the Skulltula into a mega flip that allowed me to navigate out of bounds, and past a loading plane that separated the town section from the Deku Tree area of Kokiri Forest. This keeps the Deku Tree unloaded, meaning I could just waltz right in. Inside the Deku Tree, my main obstacle from reaching the boss room at the bottom are 2 spiderwebs, one that separates the ground floor from the first basement, and another one that blocks access to the second basement level. The first one can be easily broken by climbing to the top and dropping down. The second, on the other hand, requires a fire source for it to burn away, which normally isn't an issue, since you can just use a lit Deku stick to burn the web, but I was playing on N64, where trying to use sticks as an adult crashes the game. Not that I can equip them anyways, since I would need to pause. I needed to go about it differently, and thankfully, quick put away would do the trick. In March 2020, Glitch Hunter and OOT Bingo champion, Exodus, discovered a way to light torches and burn webs without a fire source. When Link is holding a Deku stick, you can press A to put it away when the put away text appears. However, if this put away is interrupted a frame later from something like taking damage or hanging off of a ledge, you can then jump slash to break the stick against a wall, and whenever you do a crouch stab with the sword afterwards, that stab will have a glitched damage value with many properties, most notably the ability to ignite torches and webs. A year later, on October 1st, 2021, Hylie and Freddy discovered a way to activate this property of quick put away without Deku sticks on version 1.0, and Dotso would develop consistent setups for it. By walking off a ledge holding the analog stick only halfway so that the put away text doesn't disappear, you press A to put away a frame after walking off, and then B a frame later to interrupt the put away animation with a jump slash. If done correctly, you can hear the sound of Link putting away the sword as he jump slashes. Like there, see that like swipe sound? That knows how it got it. And then I stab, and my sword suddenly has fire properties that I can burn through the web. This is also why I'm specifically playing on a version 1.0 cartridge. On the back label of the cartridge, you can see some numbers punched in. If there's a letter A after the two numbers, you have version 1.1. If there's a letter B, you have version 1.2. And if you have two numbers with no letter, you have version 1.0. Even if the numbers happen to be 1-1, like my cartridge. I used quick put away to burn both spiderwebs and made my way to Goma. When you enter the fight, a stone slab falls, blocking the way you came from. I want to get rid of the stone slab for the wrong warp later on, but I also don't want to exit the boss room using the blue warp after defeating Goma. It is possible to pause the game, save, reset, and reload the save file to leave the room after beating Goma, where returning to the room gets rid of the slab, but this is a no-pause run. So instead, I jump slashed onto Goma for the killing blow, so I would go down with her. Upon dying, I would save and continue playing, respawning back at the dungeon entrance. I then leave, because even though I still could return to the Goma boss room with no stone slab blocking the door, I still wouldn't be able to use the Ocarina to perform the wrong warp. In order to use the Ocarina there are quite a few hoops to jump through. Now, what does that entail? You'll see. Oh boy, you'll see. I made my way to Lost Woods, where a simple clip into the slab allows me to use the shortcut to Zora's River without the silver scale. Here, I made my way to Zora's Domain, but a waterfall blocked the entrance, and you'd usually play Zelda's Lullaby to open the path. But since I haven't learned Zelda's Lullaby, I'd have to get past it in the same manner as I did to enter the Deku Tree, by unloading it. I accomplished this using a method found by Exodus in 2011, where I did a simple ledge clip near this ladder and began to swim out of bounds. Using the minimap in the bottom right corner as my guide, I swam past this wooden bridge, where if I did it correctly, I would be standing in the current, and the waterfall would be unloaded. This was a bit annoying, as it's easy to accidentally fall out of the water and void out. Not to mention, if you try this at low health, you'll run out of air faster and likely drown. This happened at least once, where I saved the game after dying, meaning that if I reset my console, I would be back at the Temple of Time, closer to the entrance of Zora's River. This was about to come in handy, as the next stretch of the route is brutal. Once I unloaded the waterfall, the geometry near Zora's Domain entrance was invisible, so I had to do a setup to get inside, and I actually found it quite fun. To get up, navigate invisible, we're gonna side hop, walk forward, grab the ledge, climb up until we can't walk anymore, crouch stab, shield turn left, retarget, jump up, immediately hold right while I'm jumping up to grab onto the ladder, retarget, ESS turn right, and then 2 little turns. 1, 2, I think that was 2. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 2 backflips. 1 side hop right. Oh wait, I wasn't supposed to backflip there. Whoops, I was supposed to walk. Whoops, my bad. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2. 1 side hop, and then walk here. Welcome to Ocarina of Time. This next part, however, was the opposite. Entering Zora's domain, I did a simple trick to unfreeze King Zora without blue fire, found by Sockfolder in April 2012. Now that he's frozen, I can talk to him to get the Zora's tunic, which would allow me to breathe underwater. Except that's not what happened. I had my fingers crossed, and I got the eyeball frog instead. Okay, I didn't actually cross my fingers. I just held R. Lol. The eyeball frog is normally one of the last items you obtain in the Big Goron Sword quest. Yet, holding R when talking to a newly unfrozen King Zora on versions 1.0 or 1.1 give us the eyeball frog, as long as we had started the trade quest with that egg anyways. Originally discovered by accident by a speedrunner, Jarvitz, during a race in September 2012, Glitch Hunter MZX Rules would then figure out how it worked. To keep it simple, holding R delays collecting the Zora tunic for a few frames, after which the game assumes it gave you the tunic already, so it then gives you the other item King Zora can give you, the frog. The frog is important since it has an expiration timer, as in the trade quest, you need to deliver it to the scientist at the Lake Hylia lab as ingredients for eye drops in 3 minutes before it spoils. We are not going to Lake Hylia though. We are going to Lon Lon Ranch, since I didn't get the frog to complete the trade quest. I got it because of the timer. I collected 10 rupees on the way to Lon Lon Ranch, and once I arrived, I lined up Link for a very easy out of bounds clip. Here, I side hopped out of bounds when the timer hit 7 seconds, and when the timer expired, I voided out before the text saying I ran out of time cleared, which would have taken me back to Zora's domain. Instead, after respawning from voiding out, I'm back at the Lon Lon Ranch entrance with a timer frozen at 0 seconds. I needed this frozen timer to activate the glitch that would allow me to use the ocarina in boss rooms. Windy Bee. Whenever you go to Lon Lon Ranch as an adult and pay Ingo 10 rupees to ride a horse, every C button will be dimmed, meaning you cannot use any equipable items. Any item except for one, the ocarina. Around 2007, Glitch Hunter Kazooie discovered that if you used another glitch, Bottle Adventure, to get Furore's Wind on the B button, you can set a warp point somewhere and use Furore's Wind to escape the Ingo minigame. This had some notable side effects, such as not being able to use any item equipped to C buttons except the ocarina, and being able to use the ocarina and your B button item anywhere in the game. There are some annoying side effects though. If you enter a swimming state, or climb vines or ladders, your B button will be disabled until you die or reset the game. Doing so deactivates Windy Bee. Since I do not have Furore's Wind, I used a different method to activate Windy Bee. After paying for the horse riding minigame, I reach the last text box before the screen fades to white. During this fade out, I have to close the text box by pressing A or B on the last frame before the screen completely fades to white. That's right, in order for me to do this trick, I have to time a frame-perfect A press. And if I miss, I have to set the trick up all over again. Press A too early, and you'll be stuck in the minigame. Press A too late, and you'll be back in Zora's domain without Windy Bee. But if I time it just right... Ooh, we got it! Yeehaw! I warp back to Zora's domain with Windy Bee active with the ranch minigame music playing. During one of my attempts, I managed to nail Windy Bee on my first try that day. Unfortunately for me, I did a stupid and fell into swimmable water, dimming my B button. So I had to reset back for my last save, which was all the way back in Deku Tree after beating Goma. I was really upset, and my luck wasn't going to get better for a bit. This is easily the most tedious part of the challenge, as, surprise surprise, getting a frame-perfect trick is not easy. Especially when you have to spend 10 minutes setting it up all over again. I would often go an hour or more without getting Windy Bee a single time, but when I did, I felt relieved. That was just the beginning, however, as what comes after Windy Bee is probably the hardest part of the challenge, and having crazy nerves after every single successful Windy Bee attempt didn't help. After getting Windy Bee, I carefully navigate Zora's River, and then go back to Kakariko. I then enter the graveyard for the first time, and then immediately leave. In order for the wrong warp to work later, the last cutscene I view before doing the Ganondorf wrong warp has to be one that won't cause a soft lock. This matters because when you perform this wrong warp, the last viewed cutscene is programmed to play, and if Link's coordinates during said cutscene is out of bounds when imposed in the tower's collapse interior map, that causes a soft lock. The last cutscene I viewed during the Windy Bee setup was entering Lon Lon Ranch for the first time, which soft locks the wrong warp later. The graveyard doesn't, so once I left the graveyard, I headed back to Kokiri Forest. At night. I did the Gold Skulltula Mega Flip again to enter the Deku Tree, and carefully made it down to the boss room again without dimming B. The wrong warp with Windy Bee is easily the most stressful part, as having Deku Nuts disabled in particular makes the setup a bit trickier. Without any consistent setups at my disposal, this was easily the trick I struggled with the most, and failing it meant resetting back to my last save before entering Zora's River. This happened a lot, and it was frustrating, heartbreaking, soul-crushing. The setups I found of Ganondorf under these specific Windy Bee conditions were unsatisfactory, as many of them relied on quick changes on the analog stick direction. The setups also assumed that the sword couldn't be used due to a dimmed B button. This was problematic, as in order to get the wrong warp to work, I needed to fully exit the room on the same frame as the blue warp is supposed to take Link away. Eventually, enough was enough, and I began to do more searching. That's when I stumbled upon, you guessed it, a sock folder setup from 2012. Here, I found an unbuffered Ganondorf setup as adult that used a sword slash, which allowed me to buffer a new analog stick direction, which made it very lenient. The only difference was instead of using Ocarina items, I modified the setup slightly to accommodate the actual Ocarina. It was still tricky, and I failed it a few times, but eventually... That was scary. I'm not sure if this will work. Oh my gosh! It worked! Oh, holy crap. Oh my gosh, this is the run. This is it. This is it. We finally made it through the wrong warp. I broke through. I had made it to Ganon's tower collapse without pressing start. Following this, I did an intentional death and disabled Windy Bee, making sure I didn't accidentally save. Escaping the castle was effortless, but the Ganon fight, not so much. Upon starting the final fight with Ganon, the Master Sword is knocked out of Link's hands. Well, crap. I didn't get the Big Goron Sword, or any other obvious items to damage Ganon during this phase, like the hammer or the bow and arrow. Not that I could equip them anyways, since I'm not pausing. Seemingly defenseless, it appears that beating Ganon in this state is just impossible. That is, if it weren't for the Deku Nuts. Yeah, that's right. You can actually hurt Ganon using Deku Nuts if you roll behind him and aim for the tail. 10 nuts is enough to end phase 1. Afterwards, I grab the Master Sword, which I use for phase 2. This is pretty easy, but can be very scary since you die in one hit with 3 hearts. And in case I die, I can't refill my nuts easily. I got very tense, and I even used the remaining nuts to temporarily stun Ganon to play it extra safe. Eventually, Ganon fell, and with one more swing of my blade, I had beaten Ocarina of Time without pausing the game and without pressing start. This was a fairly difficult challenge run, albeit more tedious and punishing than absurdly difficult. But I am honored to be the second human ever to complete a zero pause run of Ocarina of Time. Yeah, that's right, I wasn't the first. In fact, this was not a challenge run I came up with myself, just one that I wanted to try and show off to you guys. Back in 2019, just days after the itemless forest escape was found, a low optimization tool-assisted demonstration, or LOTAD, of Zero Pause premiered on ZFG's Twitch stream on February 21st, as part of an annual tradition known as LOTAD Day on his channel. The Zero Pause LOTAD was made by OMG A Tree and Kaztalek, and followed a route developed by Natalia Has Died and Moose. Without their great minds, as well as others like Blinny, Jolin, Danny B, Rosewater, and many others, Zero Pause probably wouldn't be possible. After the LOTAD premiere, it would take another 4.5 years for Grego to complete the first ever Zero Pause completion by a human, following Cadmic's forest escape setup and the discovery of Quick Put Away's fire properties. Grego even improved the Deku Tree route himself using Quick Put Away. I merely followed his guide, which I have linked in the video description below, in case you want to give this challenge a try. Although I completed a Zero Pause playthrough, I'm not quite satisfied. My first completion took 7 hours across multiple sittings, mostly consisting of failing Windy B, unlike Grego, who completed the run in 1 hour and 5 minutes, in one sitting. When I decide to tackle this challenge again, I plan to complete it in one sitting, and then I want to take it under 1 hour. I plan to complete it in one sitting so I can submit it onto the new leaderboard. If you're interested in seeing me tackle these kind of challenge runs and speed runs live, please follow me at twitch.tv/lunaticj. Thank you so much for watching, and
The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask is an instant classic of a sequel, and as the name suggests, masks are a major focus of the game. You use masks to gain new abilities, transform, and otherwise progress through the game, and you can't beat the game without using them. But is that really the case? In this video I'm gonna find out, and try beating Majora's Mask without ever using masks. The rules are simple. First, and most obviously, the main rule is to avoid using masks at all. From the very start of the game to the very end of it, I can never equip a mask for any purpose. Second, I'm going to try and complete all 4 of the game's temples under these rules, but if skipping a temple would allow me to skip using a mask, then that's the priority. Basically, I want to do as much as possible without using masks. Those are the only 2 rules. As long as I never use a mask, everything's fair game. So, let's get started. After giving my character the canon name, he got robbed in a forest. As soon as I gained control of Link, I farmed rupees in this area for a few minutes until I got up to 99. Money is helpful throughout the game, so I thought it made sense to grab some before the 3-day timer got started. After running forward a bit, Link encountered Skull Kid, who put a curse on him that turned him into a Deku. This isn't a mask, so we're still safe. This Deku form is an actual curse until you play the Song of Healing later to turn it into a mask. So essentially, once I get rid of the Deku form, I can never go back, and I'll be a human for the rest of the game. I played through the first cycle like normal. I got magic, played with the bombers, and got the deed that would let me get up to the clock tower. There are glitches you can do to skip parts of this, but I decided to just do it like normal. Once I finished everything I had to, I grinded for some more rupees. Once the final hours arrived, I headed up the clock tower, got back the Ocarina of Time, and returned to the dawn of the first day. After going back to the dawn of the first day, I immediately had to jump into action. I made a route of exactly what I wanted to do. I started by playing the inverted Song of Time the second the cycle began. This slows down time, making it easier to fit everything in. Right away, there was one big problem that had to be addressed. The game's first temple, Woodfall Temple, can only be accessed if you're a Deku. So if I were to turn back into a human right now as the game expects, then I would never be able to get into the temple, because I wouldn't be able to use the Deku mask. However, you're also not supposed to be able to leave Clocktown without turning back into a human. So basically, I had to find some way to leave Clocktown, get to Woodfall, open the temple, and make it back, all before turning back into a human. I started by withdrawing money from the bank to get the bomb bag, which can hold 20 bombs, and bought 20 bomb chews as well, for a total of 40 explosives. On the night of the first day, you can do a quest that lets you buy a bigger one, but I was going to have a use for bombs before that point on this cycle. so I bought this smaller bag for now. Then I headed to East Clocktown. The guard blocks the exit if you're a Deku, but if I go up against this wall and then backwalk, I'm able to very easily get past him. This let me get to Termina Field without turning back into a human. From here, I rushed over to the swamp. In this area, you have to get a potion from the shop here, which gives you a bottle. Then you can use the potion to help a lady in the woods, who gives you a boat ride to Deku Palace. Until you ride the boat, the way to the palace is blocked by big octos, which prevents you from getting through. But the potion shop won't give the bottle to a Deku, meaning there's supposed to be no way to get past the big octos and move forward. But that wasn't gonna stop me. I went to this spot in front of the big octo and stood on this flower. Then I got this Octorok to shoot a rock at me, and spun just before it hit Link, which pushed him back a bit. Then you mash A and count up to 5 spins, then side hop off to the left. The Octorok should shoot another rock just about when Link drowns, which freezes it in the air and puts you back on the flower. Then you immediately side hop back off, and hold up on the control stick into the rock. This sends you flying backwards with a lot of momentum. You go too fast for the big octo to grab you. Then you have to aim yourself to land on the middle lily pad in the cave, and then head out the other side of the cave. There's another big octo there, but this one shoots you in the direction you want to go. And just like that, I reached Deku Palace. I entered the palace and spoke to people inside. Then I rushed back out and flew over to this stone tablet on a cliff nearby, which taught me the Song of Soaring. The Song of Soaring lets you fast travel to owl statues you've hit, but since I had hit none of them, you'd think the song would be useless. But the fact that I hadn't hit any of them was actually incredibly crucial for reasons that I'll explain a little later on. Now, this was actually where the playthrough hit a weird point. After getting the Song of Soaring, I went back to the palace and got the magic beans. My plan was to plant these, then wait for day 2 so it started raining, which would make them grow, allowing me to get to the Sonata of Awakening, the song I needed to open up Woodfall Temple. But apparently, Deku Link actually can't use magic beans, which meant my entire plan went up in smoke. I needed to get this song to open the temple, and the way you do that is by planting magic beans here. I tried to think up a solution, but I couldn't come up with anything. And so, I put the game down for a while to think. How long? Well, long enough that I made an entire video on its predecessor. But I couldn't come up with a solution. So eventually, I decided to reach out to the Majora's Mask speedrunning Discord, and explained my situation to them. And 2 users, Zunar SR and Indigo Teddy, helped me out. While I'm at this point, I want to give a thank you to Zunar SR, Indigo Teddy, Pushy Misumi, Turkenheimer, and Majora1176 from the Majora's Mask speedrunning Discord for helping me out with various questions I had throughout the playthrough. So it turns out that I was on the right track, but instead of getting the magic beans, I entered the palace's left room. Here, I went into this corner, then went into first person mode and lined up like this. Then I held down the target button so I could move Link while keeping this angle. I walked around the wall to his left until he was in this corner, and then back walked into it at top speed. Then I started pausing repeatedly. In both Zelda games on the Nintendo 64, you can pause repeatedly to perform something called pause buffering, which basically allows you to advance the game a single frame at a time to pull off glitches and tricks that require you to be frame perfect. My goal was to continue backwalking into this corner, release the target button, press A a single frame later to spin, and then release the control stick a short while after. This allowed me to clip inside the wall. Once inside, I backflipped to end up on top of it, and then ran to the end of it and backflipped onto the door frame. Then I backflipped off of there and back down to the ground. That might seem like a pointless move, but jumping from the door frame put me close enough to this enemy for it to become active and start shooting. It's usually not active when you're down here. Then I went to the end of the room and backflipped onto that door frame. Since the enemy was now shooting at Link, I was able to backflip off the door frame with good timing, and one of the enemy's shots hit him in midair, which knocked him onto this wall. Now I was high enough to backflip over to this moving platform. And from there, I could use the Deku Flowers to fly over to this entrance, which led to the Sonata of Awakening. And so, after several months, I finally got it. And just in case you want proof that I'm not messing with you here, here's me pausing immediately after being thrown out of the Sonata of Awakening cutscene. As you can see, no masks. Next I headed back to the area where I got the Song of Soaring. I floated over to Woodfall, and after navigating through it, I reached this pad. I played the Sonata of Awakening on it, and opened the temple. However, you can't complete this temple as a Deku, so I had to go back to Clocktown and turn back into a human. But there was a problem. You'll remember that to get to this area in the first place, I had to take damage from an Octorok's shot, which sent Link flying backwards with enough momentum to get past the big Octo. However, on the Deku Palace side of the swamp, those enemies don't exist, so I couldn't do the same trick to get back to the other side. And of course, even though I had learned the Song of Soaring, I hadn't hit any of the statues yet. So to get back, I hopped back down to Deku Palace, and then hopped back up to the area I was just in. This was so that I could enter it from the other side, where these big dragonfly enemies started following me. Then I had to float back to where I just was, but I had to leave one of these enemies alive. By doing this, I had now brought a damage source with me that I could use to get momentum to get past the big octo. It's quite similar to what I did earlier. Once the dragonfly was close, I got a specific angle, then fell off the ledge and drowned. While I was bouncing on the water, I wanted to stay not too close to the dragonfly and not too far. Drowning put me back on the ledge, where Deku Link now got hit by the enemy, and using this momentum, I can get sent flying backwards and past the big octo. I ran back to Clock Town and entered the clock tower, where Link turned back into a human. The Deku mask fell from Link's face, and it would never be returning. And with that, Link was now a human for the rest of the game. Now I had to wait until around midnight of day 1. I wanted to get the upgraded bomb bag before I took on Woodfall Temple, and to do that, I had to stop a thief in North Clock Town at midnight. I had some things I wanted to take care of before that happened, so I got to work. First, I headed to South Clock Town. There's an owl statue here, so if I were to hit this, I could warp to this statue with the Song of Soaring, letting me fast travel to Clock Town. When you go into West Clock Town, you can see this same owl statue in the distance. This is done to give the illusion that it's the same one, but this statue in West Clock Town is actually a perfectly functioning, unique owl statue, completely different from the one in South Clock Town. However, it's normally inaccessible. It's behind the loading zone that leads into South Clock Town, so I had to get over to the statue some other way. I started by activating the infinite sword glitch. When you stab with your sword and interrupt it with certain other actions, like reading a sign or grabbing a bomb, then you'll be permanently attacking with your sword until you do certain other actions, like slashing the sword again yourself. This glitch has some other effects. If you backflip into a bomb's explosion while shielding, you'll float in midair. So using this trick, you can gain height infinitely, at least until you run out of explosives. Using this glitch, I hovered my way out of bounds, and then navigated around the loading zone to South Clocktown and jumped back inbounds to get down to the statue. Then I slashed at it to activate it. Normally when you activate an owl statue, it adds that specific statue to your Song of Soaring list, allowing you to teleport to that statue when you play the song. So over the course of the game, you can fast travel to more and more places that you've already been to. But the only owl statue I'd activated was this fake one, and since you're never supposed to be able to get to it, there's no teleport destination assigned to it. What does that accomplish? Well, normally, when you haven't hit any statues yet, the game will tell you that when you play the Song of Soaring, and you won't be able to go anywhere. But since I have hit an owl statue, the game doesn't bring up that text, but it also doesn't know where to send me since I haven't hit any real statues. And since the Song of Soaring map and the pause screen map use similar data, I can pause the game, hover over an area on the map, then play the Song of Soaring to get sent to an area I've never been to before. And once I teleport to a new area, that obviously adds that new area to my map. So I can hover over that one in the pause screen, then play the Song of Soaring again, and now I'll get sent to a new place when I play it. Essentially, within 10 minutes of warping around, I unlocked the ability to fast travel to just about every single owl statue in the game. This included ones like the owl statue at the top of Stone Tower, which meant that when I did Stone Tower Temple later on, I could skip the entire climb to the top of the tower. Also, at a few points, by traveling on foot just a little bit from where I ended up, I could add another destination to my map. For example, when I ended up at Stone Tower, I very smoothly jumped off and grabbed onto the ledge of the entrance, which let me add Icona Canyon to my map. Also, whenever you enter a new area, the map value gets reset, and it defaults to Great Bay, which let me get there too. I also warped back to Clocktown along the way, and deposited money into the bank to get the expanded wallet, letting me hold 200 rupees instead of 99. After getting the map filled out, I warped to Southern Swamp. I went to the forest and found one of the potion ladies, then went to the shop and got a bottled potion to heal her with. After using it, I now had an empty bottle, which I was going to need much later on in the game. Now I had about 6 hours to kill, so I decided to farm for some rupees. As you can probably tell, explosives are crucial, so having a lot of money so I could easily restock them felt like a good idea. I went to North Clocktown at around 11:15, and stopped the thief when he tried to rob the lady from the bomb shop. The lady gave me the blast mask, which I obviously couldn't use, but more importantly, after withdrawing some money from the bank, I was now able to go to the shop to buy a bigger bomb bag, increasing my bomb capacity from 20 to 30. This applies to bomb chews as well, meaning I went from a maximum of 40 explosives to a maximum of 60, which was pretty good. Unfortunately, to get the final bomb bag upgrade, you have to use the Goron mask, so 60 was going to be my maximum for the rest of the game. I filled up my bomb chews after buying the bag, and then I withdrew a little more money to grab Deku sticks at the shop. Then I warped over to Woodfall. It was finally time to take on the first temple. From the platform, I hovered over to the temple. In the first room, I jumped down to the ground, backflipped up onto one of the trees, climbed up to the top, then performed a hover from there to the door. As you can probably tell, bomb hovers break this dungeon wide open. In the very next room, I hovered over to a switch you're supposed to access much later on. Then in the very next room, I headed right and fought this mini-boss. Just 2 jump slashes took it out, and that got me the bow. Back in the previous room, I hovered over to the northern exit, where I fought another mini-boss. Using the bow I defeated it, which got me the boss key. And then, back in the second room, using the bow I lit the torches, which got me access to another room, and in there I hovered my way over to the boss door. And just like that, I'd made it to the boss without getting the dungeon map, without getting the compass, without even going to the second floor, and of course, without using any masks. The boss itself was easy enough. No masks are supposed to be necessary for it on a regular playthrough, so the fight went just the same as ever. And when I won, I got a 4th heart container and got the first set of remains. After learning the Oath to Order, I ended up back in Woodfall Temple. The second dungeon is in the Snowhead region, but I wanted to restart the cycle before I got to work on that, so I decided to take care of a few things in the 2 days I still had left on this cycle. I warped over to Great Bay. There, I headed over to the wall near the Pirate's Fortress. To get into the Pirate's Fortress, you need to break the barricade over the entrance as a Zora, but instead, I hovered all the way up this wall to get on top of it. The infinite sword glitch prevents you from falling off ledges, so once I got up, I walked as far as I was able to on this corner. Then using first person mode, I aimed Link at the loading zone below, turned around, and shielded to cancel the infinite sword glitch. Then, without moving, I pulled out a bomb, and just before it exploded, I backflipped, shielded, and then released the control stick. Since the infinite sword glitch was off, instead of hovering, this sent Link flying backwards with a lot of speed, sending him down to the loading zone below and letting me get inside. Once inside the fortress, I swam to the ground near the entrances, and then hovered across the gap to get inside. From there, I navigated my way up to the platform just below the bridge, and hovered my way up to it. This let me enter the room with the hookshot. Since I had the bow, I was able to knock down a beehive to get rid of the pirates, which let me get my hands on the hookshot way earlier than I was supposed to. I didn't have any other plans in the fortress, so I warped back to Clocktown. My next destination was the town shooting gallery. By beating the high score here, I was able to upgrade my quiver to hold 40 arrows instead of 30. Then I headed to the swamp, where I played the swamp shooting gallery to upgrade my quiver to the maximum size of 50 arrows. With that, I was done with everything I'd been planning to do on the first cycle. I deposited my money into the bank, and then played the Song of Time, finally capping off the most meticulously planned Majora's Mask cycle I've ever done. My destination now was Snowhead Temple. Snowhead Temple has a huge Goron that blows wind that sends you flying, making it impossible to get anywhere close to the temple. To solve this, you're supposed to do some stuff using the Goron mask, which gets you a lullaby song, which you can play to put the Goron to sleep. But since I can't use the Goron mask, I had to find another way in. So instead, I warped to Great Bay Coast. Once there, I headed for the fairy fountain. Inside, I initiated a hover and got up onto the pillars, and from there I hovered over the wall and out of bounds. Every single fairy fountain in the game is actually placed within the same map in the game's files. What this means is that after hovering out of the Great Bay Fairy Fountain a little bit, I was able to end up in the Snowhead one. It's invisible, but it's there, and it's quite close to the dungeon. But this didn't mean I was in the clear yet. As I mentioned earlier, there's a Goron that blows you away if you try to get up here before playing the lullaby. And here's what happens if you leave the Fairy Fountain. So here's what I had to do. Immediately after exiting the fountain, I had to turn towards the screen and activate the infinite sword glitch using a bomb. Like I mentioned before, the infinite sword glitch prevents you from falling off ledges, so once it was active, I was safe from being pushed off the ledge by the wind. The timing here is very tight, but I eventually managed it. Once you do it, you want to hold Z and R together to shield while targeting. If you shield without targeting, then you cancel the infinite sword glitch, but holding both lets you shield the bomb's explosion without canceling the glitch. Once the bomb is gone, you can start working your way forward. The glitch prevents you from being pushed off ledges, but doesn't stop you from being pushed around on the ground, so you can be blown around here. What you want to do is walk forward a little bit, then run at the ledge so you kind of get wedged in there, which will prevent the wind from blowing you back. Sometimes you can get stuck in place, so just side hop out when the wind isn't blowing, and then keep running forward. This works for a little bit, but then you reach a point where even if you wedge yourself on the ledge, you still get blown back to a certain point. At this point, you want to go in a first-person mode, turn away from the ledge, and aim it so that the top left corner of the letter R in the word return is touching this little platform up here. Then you leave first-person mode, turn around, and pull out a bomb. The bomb flashes between red and blue. On the third red flash, I started pause buffering until the bomb went back to blue for 2 frames. Then I unpaused, pressed Z, R, A, and down on the control stick to backflip while targeting and shielding. Then continued pause buffering while holding Z, R, and down on the stick. I continued doing this until Link's shield was directly facing the screen, where I then started holding up on the control stick instead. Then I continued pause buffering until the first frame where Link's feet touched the ground, and then I mashed A. This sent Link flying backwards at a fast speed. The wind still tried to blow him away, but as soon as it stopped, he continued blasting down the path. I kept this going until Link ended up in this little corner, where he was now safe from being pushed away again. I waited until a blow was just about to finish, then climbed up onto the ledge. Climbing up ledges cancels the infinite sword glitch, so I had to immediately activate it again, but once I did, I had secured my route into the temple. This is the path that leads into the temple itself. The only thing you really need to watch out for are these snowballs. At the end of the path, there's a part that can be a little tricky to time, but you basically want to wait around here until the wind stops blowing, then run at this point so you get caught on this ledge when it blows again, and from there you can run inside. And just like that, I made it in without the lullaby, and without even the Goron mask itself. In the very first room, there's a big block you're supposed to push as a Goron, but all you have to do to get past it is side hop into it like this. In the room with the blowing ice statues, I was able to do a simple trick to get through. If you put a bomb behind you, then turn away from it to look towards a ledge and hold down Z, when it explodes you'll get a jump that goes way farther than normal. This allowed me to clear the gap without hovering. Since I had the hookshot, it was fairly easy to breeze through the dungeon as I liked. When I eventually reached the center room with the bridges, the bomb jump trick I mentioned at the start of the dungeon let me jump between them, which let me get to the mini-boss that gives you the fire arrows. After getting the arrows, I hopped across to another bridge, then used the arrows to open the way to the next floor. Once on the next floor, I shot a fire arrow at a snowball across the way, then hovered my way across. Once there, I used bombs to clear out the rest of the snowballs, and climbed the stairs up to the top floor. And once I was there, it was another simple hover across the gap to reach the boss door. I didn't have the boss key, but fortunately, I didn't need it. I got into this corner by the door, and then I went into first person mode. I lined up so that the rounded top part of the clock fit within the door frame I could see ahead. Then I pulled out a bomb, held down Z to target, and waited until it was just about to explode. Right as it exploded, I held down shield and tapped left and A to side hop to the left, and the bomb's explosion pushed Link backwards through the wall. Then I held up right on the control stick, and Link jumped out of bounds and ended up in the loading zone behind the door. Next up was the dungeon boss Goat. To win this fight, you're supposed to use the Goron mask to chase Goat around, slamming into him to deal damage. But that's actually not necessary at all, and I think the footage pretty much speaks for itself. I grabbed the heart container, grabbed the remains, and saved Snowhead from being snowy. Unfortunately, since I can't use the Goron mask, even though the Snowhead area is peaceful again, I can't get the Gilded Sword. With that done, I only had 2 temples left. It had only taken me until just after 12 PM on day 1 to complete Snowhead, so I decided to just stay on this cycle. That way, I could keep the explosives and arrows I still had, and could just top them up before going to the next temple. I warped back to Clocktown, and topped them both up using money from the bank. Next, I was supposed to head to Great Bay Temple, but I decided instead to not do that, for reasons I'll explain a little later on. I warped to Stone Tower. As you'll remember from earlier, since I activated the fake owl statue, I can warp right up to the top of Stone Tower without doing the climb. So being up here, I'd skipped the Mirror Shield and the Elegy of Emptiness, both of which are supposed to be required for puzzles inside the temple. But even if I did have them, the Elegy in particular requires you to use multiple masks to properly make use of it, so it was out of the picture either way. It would probably be easy enough to hover my way to the entrance, but in the interest of saving explosives, I performed a glitch called Time Stop instead. This was actually the main reason I picked up the bottle back in the swamp earlier. Using the bottle, I grabbed a fairy from a pot. This meant that Link now had a full bottle in his hand. Then I ran over to the switch on the right. This brought a platform over to me that I could easily jump to. I held down Z, and then shielded and immediately pressed the button for the bottle. This put the game into a glitched state. I could now get off the switch, but the platform stayed in place as if I was still on it. So then I just jumped onto the platform, and pressed C up to activate first person mode and cancel the glitch. This made the platform move again, and since I was on top of it, it brought me over to the other side. So I made it in without using any masks. Once inside, I headed for the door on the right. There was a block in my way, but it's easy to hover to the top of it, and then I can just jump off the other side to continue. Now in this room, there's a locked door that requires a key. Obviously, Zora Link could dive deep into the water here, but human Link can't do that. Or so you would think. I activated the infinite sword glitch again, and then hovered over the water. Once I was in the air, I held a direction on the control stick, and then started mashing the button for the ocarina. This sent Link down to the ground at the bottom of the water. Once I put the ocarina away, Link started surfacing automatically, so from there I just directed him into the opening, and navigated it like normal. In the next room, the ledges were too tall for human Link to get out of the water, but the hand enemy could toss him up to solid ground. I grabbed the key, and then I had to go back the way I came. But since the hand enemy was in front of the opening, I activated the infinite sword glitch using a bomb right above it, so that the explosions simultaneously let me start my hover and defeat the enemy. Then I performed the dive glitch again, and headed back the way I came to open the locked door. In the next room, there was another block. Once again, a hover got me over, but there were some challenges doing them here. There are these little enemies that spawn consistently while you're in this room, so you have to defeat them, then initiate your hover quickly, before new ones can spawn and interrupt you. Then once you're hovering, you occasionally have to drop a bomb to the ground to defeat the enemies, then hold Z and R to shield the explosion without cancelling the infinite sword glitch. But you also have to hope that the enemies don't move around too much, because when you hold target, you lock onto one of them, which can ruin your angle if you're unlucky. But with enough patience I made it up. Once I was there, these weird enemies appeared, and they dropped bombs when they got defeated. I came in and out of this room a few times, so I could fill my bombs back up. In the next room, there are a bunch of wind gusts. You're supposed to use the Deku Mask to fly over them to get through this room, but once again, with a hover over the wall to the left, I could get around that. After that, there was a mini-boss fight that was no different from a regular playthrough, and with that, I got my hands on the light arrows. After that, I played the Song of Soaring to return to the entrance of the temple, then went outside and played it again to warp to the stone tower statue across the gap. Now that I had the light arrows, I had to hit a switch to turn the temple upside down, but it was behind the block I moved earlier. Of course, since I didn't have the Elegy of Emptiness, there was no way to keep the switch exposed so I could hit it. However, by standing in a specific position next to the left switch, and then shooting an arrow and rolling onto the switch at almost the same time, I was able to move the block while the arrow was in midair, which meant it could hit the switch. As soon as I got inside, I headed down the left path. I positioned Link around the middle of the second line from the top of this ramp, then went into first person mode and lined up so that the letter R in the word return was lined up with this thing in the distance. Then I put down a bomb, held Z and rolled forward, let go of Z, turned left and held Z again, and when the bomb went off, Link got propelled sideways. I held up on the control stick, and he grabbed onto a ledge in front of him. This is basically the same trick I used in Snowhead Temple, but sideways. Then I jumped over to a door. Now believe it or not, I was going to make it to the boss from this room. I started by walking up this ramp, and at the top of it, I aimed Link towards this platform in first person mode. Then I turned around, pulled out a bomb, and just before it exploded, I backflipped and shielded, and then immediately put the control stick to neutral. This sent Link flying backwards, letting me reach the platform with a single bomb. Once you reach this platform, make sure you break the pots at the back. After breaking the pots, I needed to get out of bounds in this room. Even though this place is upside down, if you hover below the room so that you're below the visible walls, there are actually still invisible walls that you can't get past. So instead, I had to clip out of bounds. I started by lining up Link around here, then started a hover so I ended up just below the ledge. Then I pulled out a bomb chew. When you're in a hover, the camera acts as if you're holding down Z to target, even if you're not. But if you actually target something with Z, you can release it to exit the targeting mode. So, I tapped R and A to shield the bomb chew and jump left, and tapped Z quickly while doing that to target the bomb chew in the brief moment it was out of my hands. This let me get out of targeting mode. I wanted to do this so I could change my angle. I held up left on the control stick slightly, then let the control stick go neutral, then tapped down and quickly pressed Z. This made Link change to looking this way. Now I could hover backwards, but under the platform, which put Link kind of inside this wall. I continued hovering below the platform until I clipped out of bounds, and then hovered out of bounds until a certain point, where I just fell into the loading zone for the boss room. And with that, I made it to the boss without the boss key, and without using any masks. The boss here is Twin Mold. Now, you might think that I would have to use the Giant's Mask to beat this, but that's actually not the case. You don't even need to use glitches or anything. Even in a regular playthrough where you get the mask, you can just beat Twin Mold using arrows. So that's what I did. I took out the first enemy, but ran out against the second one. I didn't feel like restarting the fight, so in an act of desperation, I decided to see where it came out of the ground, run for that point, and start spamming spin attacks, and hope that I would hit the tail as it emerged. I took a lot of damage, and even ended up dying and reviving using the fairy I'd picked up for the time stop glitch earlier, but this actually did eventually work, and did enough damage to finish it off. I got another heart container, and obtained the third set of remains. Now, the last dungeon was in Great Bay, but this was actually something of a strange point for the playthrough. In order to get to Great Bay Temple, you need to use a mask. Apparently, there are a few really crazy ways to get around it on some versions of the game, but on the Nintendo Switch version, there's no glitch you can do to get in. And I definitely wouldn't have been able to make it this far without the suspend points of the Switch version. At least with what's currently known about the game, this just isn't possible. However, that did not mean the challenge was over. If getting to Great Bay Temple was out of the picture, then I just had to find another way to make progress. I'd completed 3 of the 4 temples, but if getting to the 4th one without using masks wasn't possible, then my only option was to skip it and get to the final dungeon, the Moon, without using masks. So I went back to Clocktown, deposited my rupees, reset time to the first day, stocked up on items, and then headed to the Deku Palace. Now, a lot of the stuff I'm about to say might seem completely random, but trust me, there's a point to it. My first goal was to get inside the palace. Once I was in, I entered the throne room and let myself get captured, which sent me back outside. Then I flipped my way back in. Next, I activated the infinite sword glitch by interrupting a stab by reading this sign. Once the glitch was active, I entered this room to load it, then exited, and then entered it again. On my second entrance, I pulled out a bomb and used it to hover up to a nearby platform. Then I backflipped from that platform to the top of the doorframe, and hovered from there to a higher platform above. Up here, I broke the pot closest to the door, and collected the magic jar it dropped, but I didn't break the pot closest to the wall. Then I got into this corner, backflipped, crouched, held right on the control stick, and stabbed the wall to recoil off it. Then side hopped to the left, shielded, held up left on the control stick, and briefly released, and then shielded again, to get into a precise position. After doing all that, I went into first person mode, and adjusted a little bit so it was lined up like this. Then I dropped a bomb, held down Z and R to target and shield, walked down right until I hit this white line, and then went down a little further. Once the bomb started flashing quickly, on the second flash, I side hopped to the right and then started mashing A. I paused immediately after this to make timing things easier. Link started sliding backwards, and I quickly released Z so he was just shielding. Then I let him go through the opening and out of the room a little, but released shield before he fell off the bridge. And after doing all of this, Link was now carrying an invisible object. Now I jumped off the bridge and went into the room on the left. Once inside, I turned around, walked up to the doorframe, and held Z to target. This made Link face the wall perfectly. Then I backed away slightly, released Z, and very lightly tapped left on the control stick, so that Link performed a very tiny turn to the left. Then I held down Z again, walked Link over to this corner, held up left once he was in it, and then threw the invisible object. And after doing that, I went over to this guard specifically, and let myself get caught. And, with the most incredible power and aim in history, the guard threw me out of the palace and straight to the moon. I headed into the blue warp in front of me, and then ran for the tree and talked to the Majora's Mask kid. This began the final battle. Masks aren't supposed to be required here, so there's not too much to say, but there are some noteworthy things that came as a result of things I did across the journey. For example, since I never got the mirror shield, the beam attack in the first phase is really annoying. Normally, the mirror shield reflects it, but the regular shield does nothing against it, so I take damage even if I shield it. So I basically had to run away whenever it happened, which made the fight into a very long one. In the first phase, I knocked it down with spin attacks when it came down to the ground, then shot it with a light arrow once it was down. When it summoned the other enemies, I defeated them with regular arrows, before shifting focus back to the boss. The second phase was basically a joke. After you knock it down once, you can just spin attack repeatedly as it gets up, and you'll knock it down again before it gets away. So you can basically just stun lock the boss until it's down. In the final phase, my approach was basically to shoot an arrow, then run at the boss and jump slash at it. It was a very close fight, but after several attempts, I won with half a heart left. And with that, the adventure was over. You can indeed beat Majora's Mask without using masks. On the Switch version, you can't get to Great Bay Temple, but you can still complete all 3 other temples, make it to the moon, and defeat the final boss without ever using a mask. In case you're wondering, if you want to do Great Bay Temple, then you have to use the Zora mask just once. You can get a Zora egg as a human using a glitch, then use a duplication glitch to fill up the tank as if you got all of them. But then you have to turn into a Zora to learn the New Wave Bossa Nova, and then you have to go to Zora Hall and play it to open up the temple, at which point you can take the mask off and complete the whole thing as a human. So there we go. You can beat the whole game without ever using masks, and if you're determined to complete every temple, then you can beat the whole game using masks only one single time. Apparently on some other versions of the game, like the Wii Virtual Console version, glitches like Light Node SRM and Grotto Overlay SRM might allow you to warp into Great Bay Temple in a similar way to what I did with the Guard in Deku Palace, but I couldn't really tell you how they're done. But if you're interested in trying it yourself, then you could look into those. In any case, I hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is the classic tale of a young boy growing up to become a drink salesman. Over the course of the game, you do 3 dungeons as a kid, and then you have to turn into an adult to beat the rest of the game. But what if that wasn't the case? After all, in Majora's Mask, young Link is the hero the whole way through, and in Smash Bros he can defeat Ganondorf and Ganon. He seems capable enough to me. So, using nothing but the game's own mechanics, is it possible to beat Ocarina of Time using only young Link? In this video, I'm gonna find out. The rules are simple. First, and most obviously, Link can never turn into an adult. The entire game must be completed while Link is still a kid. Second, each dungeon gives you a heart container and a stone or medallion, and for this playthrough, I must make it into every dungeon and collect either the heart container or the stone or medallion of each dungeon. I can also collect both if I want. Only needing to get one of the two might seem like a strange rule, but you'll see later on why I did it this way. Those are the only 2 rules. As long as I'm young Link, everything is fair game. So, let's get started. After giving my character the canon name, he woke up at home in Kokiri Forest. Now, since the first 3 dungeons are supposed to be done as a kid, for the most part, the first section of the game isn't very different from a regular playthrough. I got a sword and shield, entered the Great Deku Tree, and defeated Goma in the basement. After beating her, I got the heart container and entered the warp to get the Kokiri's Emerald. Very important note, if you're following along with this playthrough for some reason, don't enter this warp and don't get the Kokiri's Emerald. Get the heart container, then save the game and reset it to end up at the dungeon entrance, then leave and exit Kokiri Forest using a glitch. You'll see why this is so important much later on, but this was a mistake on my part. After that I left the forest, and the rest of the child section went mostly the same as ever. I met Zelda, went through Dodongo's cavern to get the Goron's Ruby, then saved Princess Rudo and got the Zora's Sapphire. While doing this, I made sure to upgrade my bomb bag to the maximum size of 40, and found some gold Skulltulas to upgrade my wallet so I could grab 50 bomb chews as well. These items are going to be crucial to completing this challenge, so I wanted to make sure to get them. I also got stuff like 2 bottles and Din's Fire along the way. Something worth noting is that when you buy a set of bomb chews at the bomb chew shop, it's sold out permanently. It never restocks. So when you buy all of the store's bomb chews, the store is empty for good, and you have to get bomb chews some other way. Just something worth keeping in mind for later. After getting all 3 stones, I returned to the castle, where Zelda ran away with Impa, and Ganondorf appeared and knocked me down. Then I got the Ocarina of Time, which meant it was time for the real adventure to begin. The game expects you to head to the Temple of Time next, where you travel forward in time to become an adult, but instead, I just headed back to Kokiri Forest. In Ocarina of Time, all of the adult dungeons are present in the world when you're a kid, but you just can't get to them because you need tools and abilities that are exclusive to adult Link. But there are ways to get around that. I headed to the entrance of the Forest Temple, where you get Saria's song as a kid. Normally, you use the hook shot as an adult to jump up to the temple entrance, but since young Link can't use that, I performed a glitch called the Infinite Sword Glitch. If you stab with your sword and interrupt it with another action, like grabbing a bomb, then you'll be infinitely attacking with your sword until you do certain other actions, like slashing the sword again yourself. This glitch has some other effects. By backflipping into a bomb just as it explodes, you can float in the air. So using this glitch, you can gain height infinitely, at least until you run out of explosives. Using this glitch, I hovered my way up to the Forest Temple entrance, and made it inside as young Link. After doing the first room like normal, I entered the temple and headed for the grassy room. Then I started climbing up the vines, and performed another glitch. I let go of the vines, then grabbed back onto them and pulled out a bomb chew at the same time. The explosion forced Link through the wall, where he fell down to the bottom floor. The bottom floor was only partially loaded. I could still walk around, but it was all invisible. Fortunately, one of the things that wasn't loaded was the locked door leading to the boss. So after I fell down, all I had to do was walk forward in the darkness a tiny bit to enter the loading zone and end up in the boss room. The boss here was Phantom Ganon. Amazingly enough, the Phantom Ganon fight is actually easier as a kid than it is as an adult. For the first part of the fight, it's basically the exact same as it is for adult Link. Phantom Ganon comes out of paintings, and you're expected to use the bow to shoot at him. But as a kid, you can actually just use the slingshot for identical effect. After you do that a few times, Phantom Ganon starts flying around. This part of the fight is an absolute joke as a kid. He's designed to block your attacks until you play tennis with him to stun him, but as a kid, you have access to the boomerang, and he actually just doesn't know how to work around that. Run below him, throw the boomerang at him, and you knock him down immediately every single time. Get some attacks in until he gets back up, and repeat until he's defeated. After winning the fight, I grabbed the heart container. Now if you enter the portal here, the cutscenes that follow are pretty cool to see as young Link. But either way, there's a problem with this cutscene. After a certain point, the game actually freezes. This is why in the rules, I specified that I only need to get the heart container or the medallion from dungeons. This adventure is very full of glitches, so sometimes these cutscenes don't work properly. Apparently if you do a crazy precise glitch you can skip the cutscene and get the medallion, but to me that doesn't really feel necessary. I defeated the boss, I got the heart container, I clearly beat the temple. I'm still getting one of the rewards for beating the temple. I saved and reset the game to end up back at the entrance, then headed outside. One temple down. After that I headed back to Hyrule Castletown. It's a little weird to be coming back to the regular undestroyed version of the town after completing the Forest Temple, but it was pretty neat too. I came here to replenish my bombs at the shop. I also made sure to grab fairies for my bottles. The next temple has a gimmick that could make things much more difficult, so I wanted to have fairies so they could revive Link if he got defeated. My next destination was the Fire Temple. To get to the temple entrance, you need to get across a broken bridge, and even if you do that, the way to the entrance is blocked off by rocks. Doing all of this is supposed to be impossible as a kid. On top of that, the gimmick I mentioned comes into play here. In this crater, as well as inside of the Fire Temple itself, most rooms with lava in them are too hot for Link, and have a timer that instantly defeats you if it hits 0. As an adult, you get around this by equipping the Goron tunic, but young Link can't equip other tunics, so I had no choice but to deal with the timer in those rooms. Having 2 fairies meant I could be revived twice, and once you're revived, the timer resets. With the amount of heart containers I currently had, entering a room at full health gave me a 56-second timer, meaning that 2 fairies would give me almost 3 minutes in a single room. Before any of that though, I had to actually make it to the temple, and to do that I performed a glitch called a mega flip. To do it, you put down a bomb, face it, and step back until the A button says attack instead of grab, then roll into it while shielding as it explodes and then immediately backflip. If you get the timing right, Link gets sent flying backwards, and can cover lots of distance. Using this trick, I jumped to the platforms on the west side of the room, then jumped to the rock with the heart piece on it, and finally jumped to the bridge below, making it over the rocks. After that it was a mad dash to the temple entrance. I ran in, jumped down, and ran for the opening. It took a few tries, but eventually the approach that worked was to backwalk to the top of the ladder, since backwalking is faster than walking forward, then side-hopping down the ladder and running forward into the entrance. Doing it this way, I made it in with less than a second left on the clock. An exciting start to the temple. The first bit of the temple wasn't too different from normal. I ran around freeing the Gorons to get the keys as usual. There were a few spots where I couldn't play like normal though. For example, some ledges that adult Link can grab are too tall for young Link, so to get up them, I had to perform the ground jump glitch, which basically lets you jump straight up to gain some extra height. There were a few times where I ducked back to the entrance room too. The timer in the lava rooms is based on how many hearts you have when you enter the room, so I wanted to keep my hearts as full as possible. After getting a few keys, I had to get through the center lava room, enter into another lava room, push a block onto a geyser, then ride it up to the next floor, all on one timer, since the timer transfers between rooms if they both have lava in them. I moved as fast as I could, and thankfully I made it with a bit of time to spare. The next room required me to use multiple glitches to make it through. Young Link doesn't have the items you're supposed to use to get around here, so I had to hover up a wall to get up, and then do the clipping glitch I did in the Forest Temple to get through a wall and make it to the next Goron for the key. After proceeding a little bit, I reached the next room of note, the one with the Wall of Fire. This room has the wall of fire coming after you, but young Link can't get to the areas you're supposed to get to normally. Instead, I briefly jumped into the lava to make the wall pass through me, which gave me a bit of time before it came back around. Then I had to do a hover to get to a door, but doing it with regular bombs isn't fast enough, since you have to wait for them to explode. Instead, I had to do it with bomb chews. After doing the infinite sword glitch, by pulling out the slingshot holding Z, backflipping, and then shooting and exploding a bomb chew while shielding, you can hover much faster without needing to wait. This method took me quite a while to get the hang of, but once I did, I actually found it easier than the regular bomb method. And so I made it up the wall and to the door to proceed. After making my way through a few more rooms, I made it to the Megaton Hammer. This item is required to defeat the boss at the end of the dungeon. Unfortunately, young Link can't use it. Or so you would think. By doing a simple glitch called Equip Swap, I can equip the hammer onto young Link. And once it was equipped, I could use it just fine as young Link. The hammer is invisible, but it actually works perfectly. After getting it, I jumped off and played the Song of Time to reach another Goron. After getting the key from the chest, I saved the game and reset to get back to the entrance. With the hammer equipped, I was now able to get to the door on the right side of the entrance room. The rooms inside went basically the same as normal. I fought some enemies, fought the same mini-boss I'd faced earlier in the dungeon, and finally got my hands on the boss key. I headed back to the entrance, and after refilling my health, I headed to the room on the left, where I did a mega flip to get to the platform with the boss key door, and at last I had made it to the end of the fire temple. Unfortunately, this didn't mean it was smooth sailing yet. The boss's room was filled with lava as well, and that meant that the clock was ticking the entire time I was fighting. I'd managed to avoid using any of my fairies up to this point, which meant I had about 3 minutes to take Volvagia down. Fortunately, I was able to pull it off. There's a trick you can do to defeat Volvagia very quickly, where you throw bomb chews into the last hole it flew into, because a hitbox gets stored there for some reason. If you're fast enough, you can defeat Volvagia in a single cycle using this trick. I wasn't able to do that, but by doing the trick a few times and using the hammer on Volvagia when it appeared, I was able to take it down. I used up both of my fairies, but I made it. Another cool thing was that unlike the Forest Temple, the cutscene here didn't freeze, so I was able to actually keep the Fire Medallion. I got the heart container, then jumped into the warp and got the medallion. And then something interesting happened. After the cutscene ended, I was placed back in the Death Mountain crater, but most of the geometry was invisible. My best guess is that it tried to load me into the adult version of the map as young Link and didn't quite know what to do, but I don't really know why this happened. But I did notice that the rocks blocking the entrance to the Fire Temple were not present in this version of the map. This gave me an idea. In this crater, there's a great fairy fountain that doubles the size of your magic meter, but there are rocks blocking the entrance, so you need the hammer to get rid of them, unless you do another glitch I wasn't good at earlier. Obviously, I had the hammer now, but since I had the chance, I thought it would be cooler to get into the fountain on this version of the map. Using the mini-map to navigate, I did a mega flip over to the platform, then ran right in, since the rocks weren't loaded on this version of the map. After that, I exited the crater through the Goron City entrance. This put me right in front of Darunia, who I just saw 5 seconds ago in the Chamber of Sages. I headed back to the castle town to replenish my bombs and bomb chews, then got 2 more fairies from the forest. While I was in the forest, I also took the chance to replenish all of the Deku items, like sticks and slingshot ammo. The enemies and grass inside and around the Great Deku Tree had them all, so I just ran in and out of the dungeon until they were filled up. And with that, my next destination was Lake Hylia, and not for the reason you might expect. The next temple was the Water Temple, which is accessed from Lake Hylia, but before heading there, I wanted to do something cool. I headed to the fishing pond. For 20 rupees, you can go fishing here, and if you catch the big fish, you can get a prize from the counter. As young Link, this prize is a heart piece, and as adult Link, it's the Golden Scale, which lets you dive really deep into water. Since I was young Link, the Golden Scale is supposed to be inaccessible, but by catching the big fish, swimming to the center of the lake, holding Z and R, and then talking to the guy at the counter without releasing the buttons, for some reason he glitches and gives you the Golden Scale. This item is entirely optional, but I thought it was a cool trick, so I wanted to do it. Back outside, it was time to enter the temple. Normally you have to open a gate, which makes it so you can get to the entrance. Instead, I headed for the laboratory on the shore. By walking at this corner and then backflipping, you can clip inside the house. Then you can jump through the opening in the ground to fall out of bounds. The water from the lake extends downwards infinitely, but doesn't extend all the way horizontally. So you can swim out of it to start falling, and then pull yourself back in to re-enter the water from lower down. I did this until I was very far down out of bounds, and then started swimming in the direction of the temple entrance. Since I was so far down, I was able to stay out of bounds all the way back up, which let me swim into the loading zone for the temple and get inside. Now, the Water Temple is this game's most infamous dungeon. To get to the boss room, you need the long shot, which you get inside the temple. But even if you do the equip swap glitch, young Link can't actually use the long shot, and the game will freeze. Fortunately, I can very easily hover across the gap to the boss door from the very first room in the temple. Once there, I climbed the ramp to the boss door. I don't have the boss key, but fortunately, just like in the forest temple, I can skip it. I started by doing 2 bomb hovers into the air. Then I dropped a bomb and pulled out my sword just as it exploded. Pulling out the sword cancels the infinite sword glitch and sends Link back down to the ground, and the bomb's explosion clips him through the boss door, letting me get inside the boss room. Once inside, I had to fight Morpha. This actually isn't as much of a problem as you might think. If you look up guides for this game, they'll all tell you to use the long shot on the boss, but that's actually not necessary at all. When the boss's arm starts appearing, if you jump into the water, the arm will grab at you, and the ball thing will start bouncing around to try and hit you. Climb back on land, and it'll still be bouncing around, allowing you to hit it with a spin attack. Do this enough times, and you can take it down. Now let me tell you, this is some of the most agonizingly boring Ocarina of Time gameplay you can get. It takes absolute ages and is very annoying, but it can be done. I grabbed the heart container, and this medallion cutscene also didn't freeze. The Zora princess Link met at breakfast this morning somehow aged 7 years, and some person he's never met tells him that the lake is finally back to normal and full of water, even though I swam in it before I even did anything in the temple. I headed back to the castle town. Most of my items were still full, but I'd used 13 bomb chews. The shop only had sets of 20 left, which meant I'd be missing out on some of them since you can only hold 50. I chose to keep those in stock for later, so to replenish my bomb chews, I played the bowling game to win some. I also got a heart piece at the same time, which was the 4th one I'd collected, so I got another container. I also went back to the forest to grab more fairies, since I had used both in the last boss fight. Next I headed for the graveyard in Kakariko village. The entrance to the Shadow Temple is here, but it's out of reach. As usual though, hovering can get me up to the entrance. Din's fire lit the torches, and I was in. As soon as you get inside, there's a large gap. You're supposed to use the long shot to get over it, but I just hovered over. For the most part, for this dungeon I actually just followed a glitchless speedrun route. I figured that this would probably work, because the item you get in this dungeon for adult Link are the hover boots. These basically let you glide in midair for a second, which meant that for any points where they're supposed to be required, I could just do bomb hovers instead. And that's basically what I did. I followed the glitchless speedrun route, and added in bomb hovers where I needed them as young Link to get across gaps or gain some extra height. At one point during the temple, I had to save the game and reset so I'd get sent back to the entrance. I took the chance to leave the dungeon entirely and replenish my items, which is something I don't normally get a chance to do mid-dungeon. There was another room along the way that was a lot different than normal. This room is full of fans. They blow you around, but since I was young Link and didn't have access to things like the long shot, I had no choice but to hover across the gaps, which was way too slow to do before the fans start going. Since the infinite sword glitch stops you from falling off ledges, I activated it before entering the range of the fans, then ran through the hall and initiated a hover, which kept me stuck in the air. However, if I tried to backflip when the fan behind me was blowing, it would send me flying forward and ruin it. On top of that, each fan goes at a slightly different time, so I couldn't even use the one in front of me for reference. I just had to listen for the fan behind me and jump. Once I got across, the infinite sword glitch prevented me from being pushed off, so I was able to make it to the next room. This room had fans too, but all I really had to do was aim Link towards each fan so he'd grab the ledge when it started blowing, and then work my way forward until I reached the last one, at which point I used its air to jump to a door. A little further on, I pushed a block over to a ladder. Now that the block was out of the way, I could get back to this area as a shortcut, so I decided to leave and replenish my items once again. This dungeon definitely took a lot more items than some of the previous ones had. Back in the dungeon, I hovered up to the top of the block I pushed, then rode the boat and made it to the next area. Here I got a small key, and also finally made it to the boss key. With the boss key in hand, all I had to do now was make it to the boss. Unfortunately, one more hurdle stood in my way. Back in the room where the boat was, you're supposed to shoot a fire arrow at bombs across the gap to knock down a statue you can use as a bridge. Since I couldn't do that, I instead had to hover all the way across, which used up a ton of bomb chews. After opening a door with a small key, the boss door was in sight. I just had to jump across a few invisible platforms. One of them seemed too far for young Link to reach, but a mega flip was able to get me across. And with that, I jumped over to the boss door and headed in. The next boss was Bongo Bongo. You're expected to use the Lens of Truth, but it's not actually necessary. You can hit the weak point when it's invisible if you can find it. The easiest way I found to do this is to stun both hands by damaging them. They'll start sliding at you, and the main boss will always be in between them. Once it's vulnerable, I did a jump slash with a Deku stick, and then did crouch stabs with the Kokiri sword. Deku sticks are actually much stronger than the Kokiri sword is, and crouch stabs are glitched in this game and always take the power of the last attack you did. So by crouch stabbing, I'm attacking with the power of a Deku stick jump slash over and over. Repeat this process a few times, and Bongo Bongo goes down. After grabbing the heart container, I headed into the warp. Impa told Link about events 7 years ago, but he just met her like a few hours ago, so I'm not really sure what she's on about. And unfortunately, the game froze after this cutscene. So like with the Forest Temple, this was another case where I just have to take the heart container as proof of my victory. After stalking back up, my next destination was Gerudo Valley. Normally, this area is completely off limits until you're an adult, but by hovering over the gate without the guards seeing me, I was able to get in. After enjoying a moment of rest in a tent that won't exist for 7 years, I entered the Gerudo's fortress. I headed directly for the gate that led to the Haunted Wasteland. You're supposed to complete a quest here as an adult to open the gate, but instead of doing that, I just climbed up to the top of the watchtower and hovered over the fence, letting me head straight into the wasteland. The Haunted Wasteland itself is also a bit of an ordeal. Using a specific route through the area, you can actually make it to the Spirit Temple yourself, just like this. It's actually not very hard if you have the route on hand, though there was an interesting trick or two required. Before too long, I reached the Spirit Temple. But I gotta be honest with you here. Going into the Spirit Temple, I knew that the item you get from this dungeon is the Mirror Shield, which isn't part of the regular item inventory, and that meant that I couldn't use the equip swap glitch to equip it on young Link. On top of that, doing some research, I found out that if you glitch your way up to the boss area, a mandatory enemy actually doesn't spawn if you're young Link, making it impossible to move forward. And even if you could, the actual bosses in the next room require the Mirror Shield to defeat them. Now apparently, these issues can be solved by doing some absolutely insane glitches. For example, arbitrary code execution is possible in this game, which basically lets you do anything you want. You can warp anywhere, get any item, equip anything, see any cutscene, anything's possible. But I tried looking around online for explanations, and to me, it all looked like gibberish. From what I was able to gather, the numbers and letters refer to Link's angle, and ESS is short for a glitch called Extended Super Slide, but this is a little too complicated for me. Also, I think to take advantage of some parts of these glitches, you might have to use specific file names and play on the Japanese version or something. I don't really know, but my understanding is that basically, using these glitches, you can manipulate the game however you want. So you can equip the Mirror Shield as young Link, load directly into the boss room, and win the fight that way. But I've got no idea how to do it. Luckily though, I still had a plan. As you might remember, at the start of the video I said in the rules that I had to make it into each dungeon, and also collect either the heart container or the medallion of each dungeon. I made it into the Spirit Temple to fulfill the first half of that, which was an interesting journey in itself. But if making it to the end of the dungeon to get the medallion normally was out of the picture, then I could still fulfill the second half of these conditions if I managed to get the medallion some other way. I exited the temple, then saved the game and reset so I'd be back in Kokiri Forest. I headed into the Lost Woods and used up both of my fairies, then caught bugs in the empty bottles. Next, I headed back to Kakariko Village. There, I threw a Deku Nut at a Cucco, which did damage to it. If I were to hit it with a bomb at this point, that would be enough damage that the cutscene where the Cuckoo started attacking would play. Next to the tree near the town entrance, there's a carpenter complaining about his workers. When you're an adult, and only when you're an adult, this guy is part of a series of trading side quests, and he'll give you the broken Goron sword in exchange for another item as part of those quests. But again, that's for adult Link only. Young Link cannot receive the broken Goron sword, since that side quest is only available as adult Link. However, if I bring the Cucco a good distance away from the guy, drop a bomb next to the Cucco, and then run over to the guy and talk to him as the bomb explodes, his text box will appear, but the cutscene with the Cuccos will also start playing at the same time. If I close the text box during this cutscene and then play Saria's song next to the guy once the cutscene is over, I can choose to talk to Saria. And for some reason, that series of actions I just took makes the guy give me the broken Goron sword, as if I had spoken to him as adult Link as part of that side quest. So I got the broken Goron sword as young Link, something that's never supposed to be possible. Now, you might be wondering why I bothered doing this. Like I mentioned, this item is just part of a series of trading side quests. It's not a weapon you can use, and I can't use it for anything. But getting this broken Goron sword was just the first step. Next, I left Kakariko and headed for Lake Hylia. My destination was the fishing pond. Before heading inside, I did the equip swap glitch again to put the broken Goron sword on my right C button specifically. After that, I headed into the pond. I paid the guy at the counter to play the fishing game, and then I swam into the water. Once in the water, I swam as close as I could to the shore without making Link stand on the ground. Then I tapped the A button briefly to make Link dive for a second, and started mashing B. This allowed me to cast the rod, but instead of having the fishing controls come up, I was able to keep moving as Link. So then I just headed for the door. Normally, the man at the counter stops you from leaving with the rod, but with this glitch active, I was able to just walk right out. Now instead of my sword, I have the fishing rod as my B button item. Then, by doing a series of steps I'll put on screen, I managed to replace the fishing rod on the B button with a bottle while catching bugs. And for whatever reason, catching bugs in a bottle like this while the broken Goron sword is on the C right button gives me the Shadow Medallion and the Spirit Medallion, just like that. Also, I apparently managed to delete the Fire Medallion and give myself the Forest Medallion. After that, I can just go to the equipment menu and select the Kokiri sword. Even though it's already highlighted as if it's equipped, selecting it will equip it back over the bottle. And just like that, all is back to normal. So, with the Spirit Medallion collected, young Link's journey through the temples was finished. All that was left now was the final battle. Now, if you're familiar with Ocarina of Time glitches, then you might know something interesting about the Shadow and Spirit Medallions. Since the Shadow Temple and the Spirit Temple are intended to be the final two temples you do, the game only checks for those two medallions for endgame stuff. If I had done this trick as Adult Link, I could head to the Temple of Time to get the light arrows and open the bridge to Ganon's castle even if I had never done any dungeon in the game. Unfortunately, the light arrow cutscene doesn't play in the Temple of Time for young Link, and Ganon's castle doesn't exist yet. So even if I got to Ganon's castle, I couldn't actually defeat Ganondorf because I don't have the light arrows. Luckily for me though, I actually didn't need to fight Ganondorf. After stocking back up in the castle town, I saved and reset to end up back in Kokiri Forest. Inside of Link's house, I paused the game, then unpaused and headed outside and off to the Great Deku Tree. Once inside, I made my way down to the boss room. In this room, I aimed myself at the door, then emptied my bugs and re-caught them so Link had the full bottle in his hand. Then I ran backwards until the bump started to decline, and did 3 backflips when it did. While in midair during the third, I pressed the button for the bottle followed by the sword button in quick succession, and as I jumped into the warp, Link started playing his sword as an ocarina. But more importantly, doing this glitch interrupted the warp cutscene. By now doing a series of specific movements, I can exit through the door and end up warping straight to Ganon's castle. Now, do you remember back in the beginning when I told you not to get the Kokiri's Emerald? This is why. I tried this glitch for actual hours, even trying methods that were supposedly very easy to pull off, and I could not get it to work at all. After doing some research though, I found out that this glitch requires the Kokiri's Emerald cutscene to still be available, and since I already got that way back at the start of the game, this glitch isn't possible anymore. So I had no choice but to start a new save file for this trick. As I'm sure you can
Alright, there's enough PvP for now. Got my helmet. Now I just gotta get like these smaller pieces here. At least for my resto set, then I still gotta work on my enhanced set, which I only have weapons for. So trinket is probably next on the list here. I think I want this maybe as a healer, or maybe I want this. Same amount of resilience. On use, stronger. Or do I want this for getting trained? Anyways,